In this video, I'm going to show you how to increase protein intake in your diet. You'll find lots of suggestions, as well as some of my personal favorites. I'm going to share top protein sources, and at the end, I'm going to mention some foods that people think are great sources of protein, but actually aren't. I recommend that my clients get 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. For some people, this is a bit of a struggle at first if they weren't fans of protein before. Here are my top suggestions for adding protein to your diet. Chicken breast. There's a reason that bodybuilders talk about this all the time. It is a staple because it has such a high amount of protein for a smaller serving. A boneless, skinless chicken breast has about 23 grams of protein, which is very good. And that's only 110 calories. So as I go through these foods, I'm also going to mention how many calories are in that serving size. So if you're adding a lot of calories, but you're not getting as much protein, then it's not as valuable a protein source. If you're trying to get into a calorie deficit and lose body fat or lose weight, you want to also reduce your calorie intake a little bit. So you want to get the protein as high as possible and then keep the calories relatively low. Unsweetened Greek yogurt. This one here, 3/4 of a cup, 90 calories, so quite low, 15 grams of protein. I also have Icelandic skyr, which is a type of yogurt. For 3/4 a cup, it's 110 calories and 19 grams of protein, so that's quite a lot. These are low-fat varieties, so that means the fat is lower and the overall calories are lower, and you're getting quite a lot of protein. Eggs can be a good source of protein. A single egg only has about 6 grams of protein, and that's in about 70 calories. It's not bad, and a lot of the nutritional value is in the yolk, but if you want to increase your protein intake, then you might want to add egg whites as well. So if you're doing scrambled eggs or an omelet or something like that, then you can have 1 or 2 whole eggs, and then you can also add egg whites. 1/4 cup of egg whites, which is about 2 egg whites, 7 grams of protein. And that only has 35 calories. So it's a good way to top up your protein when you're having eggs. That's often what I do. I'll have 2 eggs and then I'll mix it in with a bunch of egg whites. Then I'm going to increase the protein value of that meal, get a little bit of nutrition from the yolks, and then also get a lot of protein with very few calories. Sometimes I do a bit of a stir fry where I mix in chicken and vegetables into the egg whites as well, and that can be really tasty. Cottage cheese can be a good source of protein. This one here, for 1/2 cup, 100 calories and 14 grams of protein. There's also something called pressed cottage cheese. It doesn't have as much flavor, but it is quite high in protein as well, so you can easily add that to other things. Dairy products are a good source of protein, particularly the lower fat varieties. There's one other source of protein I really like. It's bocconcini, and it's a lower fat version. So 1 piece of bocconcini has 8 grams of protein, and they're about that big. If you have 3 of those, you've got 24 grams of protein, so not bad really. Milk is also a fairly good source of protein. It's very easy to take in. So I've got a regular milk here. This one's 2%. 1 cup has 130 calories. It has 9 grams of protein. There are lactose-free versions as well for those of you who don't digest lactose. There's actually some milk that has slightly more protein than others. For 1 cup, it has 130 calories, but this one has 14 grams of protein. If you mix some milk in with your protein shake, then you're adding even more protein. Lower fat versions of dairy tend to have fewer calories. They also have more protein. That doesn't mean that you should always have lower fat sources of dairy. It's good to mix it up a little bit. It's totally fine to have some fat in there. It can actually increase your feeling of satiety with a meal. So sometimes if you have too much in the way of low fat dairy products, then it won't fill you up as much. Lean ground meats can be a good source of protein. So that's either turkey, chicken, pork, or beef. Turkey and chicken tend to be a little bit lower in fat, so they're going to give you a little bit more protein for the amount of calories that you're taking in. So extra lean ground turkey breast, that has about 128 calories and 27 grams of protein in about 3 ounces. Fish can be a good source of protein, particularly the white fish like cod or haddock. Things like salmon are also good sources of protein, but do keep in mind that they're going to be higher in calories and higher in fat. That's not to say you should avoid them. Obviously, omega-3 fats are higher in those sources. Canned tuna, 26 grams of protein. for 120 calories. So that's very good. Now, the one thing that you want to note when it comes to fish is mercury levels, so you don't want to overdo it with cans of tuna. An adult who's not pregnant could safely have probably about 2 to 3 cans of tuna per week of chunk light tuna. That's the lower mercury version. Chunk light tuna comes from the skipjack variety of tuna, so it's lower in mercury, about a third less mercury than albacore tuna. This chart here is going to show you how much fish you can safely have in terms of mercury based on your body weight. Whey protein powder is also a good source of protein. Some people consider it a supplement. I don't. It basically comes from milk. Whey isolate is a little bit higher in protein. It doesn't have any fat, whereas concentrate has a little bit of fat. Whey isolate tends to be a little easier on the digestion. The biggest plus for whey concentrate is that it's cheaper. So if you're trying to budget, whey isolate is going to cost you a little bit more, but they're actually quite affordable when you compare them to meat, for instance, for the amount of protein that you're getting. And now we'll move on to the vegetarian sources of protein, which I actually think are more just supplemental proteins for people who are consuming animal products, because you'll see they're not as high in protein for their serving size as the animal products are. Lentils, not a bad source of protein. Half a cup of lentils has about 9 grams of protein in 110 calories. Edamame. So this one is showing half a cup, 90 calories, and that has 9 grams of protein. We just keep this in the freezer and boil them up when we want to eat them. Tofu can be a decent source of protein. 3 ounces of tofu is only about 70 calories, and you're going to have about 7 grams of protein in that. Beans can be a reasonable source of protein. Beans are fairly similar in their quantity of protein. My example here is black beans, 7 grams of protein in half a cup, and that's about 110 calories. And you'll find most beans are around that range. And now we're going to move on to foods that are not as good protein sources as most people think. The first one is quinoa. Some people think of quinoa as a grain, but it's actually a seed, which may actually explain its nutritional profile a little bit. Half a cup of quinoa has 12 grams of protein, which is not bad, but that's going to bring in about 313 calories, and it also has 5 grams of fat. So when you compare that to the other protein sources we've already talked about, it doesn't really measure up. Oatmeal. A lot of people think that that's a really great high protein thing to have in the morning, but half a cup of oatmeal only has about 5 grams of protein in about 150 calories. Now, if you do want oatmeal as your primary protein source in the morning, for instance, then you could also mix it in with some higher protein milk, maybe even some protein powder, and then a little bit of nuts as well. So it all will add up. We don't always have to think of our protein sources individually. Sometimes you can combine some lesser protein sources and put them together into a fairly decent protein source. Ideally, trying to get about 20 grams of protein per meal or snack. It's not that you need to have a certain amount at one time, but if you only have very, very small amounts of protein, you're going to have a hard time adding it up over the course of the day. So if you do about 30 grams of protein and you have that 4 or 5 times a day, for someone who's on the lighter side, that's going to work. It's going to be enough to meet your protein goal for the day. Nuts are also not a great source of protein. A half a cup of almonds, which is quite a decent serving size, has about 15 grams of protein. That's true. But that serving is about 414 calories and 36 grams of fat, which is quite a lot. So if you're trying to achieve a calorie deficit in order to lose weight, you're going to have a harder time. Almonds are probably the highest in protein of the nuts, so I'm using them as an example. Other nuts like macadamia nuts or walnuts or cashews are a little bit higher in fat and lower in protein even further. So consider nuts a source of fat rather than a source of protein. Peanut butter is not a great source of protein. 1 tablespoon only has about 4 grams of protein, and that's close to 100 calories. And we know a lot of us don't have 1 tablespoon of peanut butter at a time, do we? You've also got 8 grams of fat in that 1 tablespoon. So peanut butter, while very tasty and delicious, is not a great source of protein. Consider it a source of fat. Remember that I'm not saying to not eat those foods. You can certainly incorporate them into your diet, but just don't consider them your primary sources of protein. I've spoken about most of these protein sources as a good choice for weight loss or for fat loss, but if you're looking primarily for muscle building, hypertrophy, then you may want to actually increase your calories. So you can take in the protein, but you also want to take in excess calories in order to build muscle. So if you're ever looking for protein information for a product, if it's not on the label that you've got, just use an app like MyFitnessPal that gives you the nutrition information for different foods. Let me know in the comments what your favorite protein sources are. Please hit the like button if this video is helpful. It helps my channel to grow. And subscribe and hit the bell for evidence-based fitness and nutrition information.